everyone. All right, it is time for us to read the next chapter in our Stink book, okay? So remember, the next chapter was called Miss Space Camp Know-It-All. The next day, Stink was sitting at his own desk, minding his own business, when Riley Rottenberger waltzed past, showing off her new shirt. It did not say Space Cadet. It did not say Space Out at Space Camp. It said, Pluto is dead. Who is that? Asked Skunk. Rotten Riley Rottenberger, aka Miss Know-It-All. Riley turned around. She fake smiled at Stink and Skunk. When is a planet not a planet? She asked them. When it's grumpy, said Stink. When it's sneezy, said Skunk. No, when it's Pluto, said Riley, cackling all the way to her desk. Pluto is so a planet, said Stink. A dwarf planet. He turned to Skunk. She thinks she's so great because she got to go to space camp. Okay, Gibson, I love you. Sorry, guys. Gibson wanted to join the video. Okay, I'll reread what I just read. She turned to Skunk. She thinks she's so great because she got to go to space camp. For your information, Pluto is not a planet anymore, said Riley. Don't you guys know anything? Oh, I forgot. You never went to space camp. Riley was right. Stink had never been to space camp. He had never tried on a spacesuit, except one made out of aluminum foil in preschool. And he never got to see inside a spaceship, except the cardboard box kind. Did you get to ride in the gravity chair? Skunk asked Riley. And the 5 degrees of freedom chair, said Riley. It floats on air. Stink wished he had 5 degrees of freedom from Riley Rottenberger. Don't ask her questions, Stink warned, or she'll never, ever stop talking. Why didn't Saturn want to sit next to Jupiter? Skunk asked anyway. Why? Asked Riley. Because Jupiter had a lot of gas, said Skunk, holding his nose. Hey, no fart jokes in class, said Miss Know-It-All. Mrs. D said. I have one, said Stink. He couldn't help himself. Why didn't Saturn's mom want him to take a bath? Why? Said Skunk. Because he always left rings in the bathtub. Good one, said Skunk. Riley ignored them. Time to get into groups, said Mrs. D. Stink was on a team with Webster and Sophie of the Elves. He asked Skunk to join them. Each team was making a model of the solar system. Stink and his team were using styrofoam balls for the planets. They dipped hunks of raw wool in soapy water. Once the wool was stretchy, they shaped it around each ball to form the outer surface of the planet. Riley's team was making planets out of fancy clay. Riley leaned over and pointed to the tiny ball in Stink's hand. What's that? What does it look like? It's the planet Pluto. Stink moody, said Riley. How many times do I have to tell you? Pluto is not a planet. Is too, said Stink. Is not. Is so too. Riley, turn around, Webster said. You're not even on our team. I don't see why everybody's so down. So these were some of the materials that they were using for their planets. I don't see why everybody's so down on Pluto, mumbled Stink, adding a touch of purple gray to his planet. Pluto's cool. It might be small, but it doesn't just do what all the other planets do. It has its own orbit. Yeah, said Skunk. I don't get why they voted to take it away. Because Pluto's puny, like a dwarf, Riley butted in. Pluto gets its butt kicked by all the other planets. If an asteroid came, Pluto would be all, I'm scared, and shrink away. Nuh-uh, said Stink. Uh-huh. Ask anybody. I learned it at space camp. Space camp, space camp, space camp, said Stink. People should boycott space camp for telling lies about Pluto. Stink, Riley, Mrs. D said sharply. What's going on back there? You're supposed to be working on your science. Riley's hand shot up into the air. This is science, she said. That's what we're fighting about. Mrs. D came over to their tables. What seems to be the problem here? Riley says there's no Pluto, said Stink, and I say there is. Riley, what makes you say there's no Pluto? Asked Mrs. D. You said it yourself, said Riley. Pluto got its butt kicked out of the solar system. It's just a number now. Riley, I'd rather you didn't say but in this class. Stink couldn't help from smiling, but his teacher said but. But it's still up there, Stink said, even if it is a dwarf planet. Actually, said Mrs. D, you're both right. Huh? Scientists argued about it too. They had to study Pluto for a very long time. Then they had a big meeting, said Riley, and voted it O-U-T out. Yes, they did, said Mrs. D, but some scientists still think Pluto should be called a planet. Yes. Stink pumped his arm in the air and high-fived his team. Tell you what, said Mrs. D, why don't we turn it over to our own panel of scientists? You mean we get to be scientists right here in our class? Asked Stink. Sure. We can have a discussion, a debate next Friday. Riley, your team can explain why you think Pluto should not be a planet anymore. Stink, your team can argue why Pluto should be a planet still. You have exactly 1 week to prepare your arguments. Super Galileo, said Stink. Riley narrowed her eyes at Stink. Stink Moody, you are such a Pluto head. Thanks, said Stink, sitting up a little taller. Okay, here are his comics. My very excellent mother just served us 9 pizzas. Jupiter, big, badder, best. I'm biggest, I'm baddest, I'm Jupiter jerk king of the planets. Biggest. How big am I? Try as big as 1,300 Earths. Fastest. I rotate the fastest of any planet in our solar system. A day with me is only 10 hours long. Baddest. Check out my great red spot. It's a storm that has been raging for at least 300 years. P.S. I have rings too. Take that, Saturn and Uranus. Alrighty, that's the end of our chapter. Next time, we'll be reading chapter that is called Jupiter Jerks. So, stay tuned to find out what is going to happen next in our Stink book. Alrighty, guys. Bye.